Deep in the cold, star-dusted heart of Valkyrie territory, aboard the flagship Invictus, a conclave of conquerors was about to make a civilization-ending mistake. The strategic chamber glowed with the soft, sinister purple of holographic star maps, illuminating the crimson-scaled face of Admiral Cathron, a being whose very lineage was a monument to martial supremacy. His forearms were crossed behind his back in a posture of supreme confidence, a statue of a predator surveying its domain. Before him, the plotted course of destiny shimmered, a line of conquest drawn through a quiet sector of space. A sector that was not, according to his newest reports, empty. Another species, his voice rumbled, a sound like grating stone, lays claim to a region we have marked for the Dominion. They call themselves humans. He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a cluster of 17 star systems, each marked with the blocky, angular script of this new race. They have planted their flags on worlds within our rightful territory. From the shadows of the strategic table, Ambassador Thelvar stepped forward, his silver scales catching the light, a diplomat's colors in a room of warriors. His large, dark eyes, polished like obsidian, reflected not ambition, but a deep, unsettling concern. "My Lord Admiral," Thelvar began, his voice a careful counterpoint to Cathron's thunder. "Our intelligence on this species is nascent. Would not wisdom dictate a period of study? An attempt at peaceful parley before we summon the spear?" Cathron's mandibles clacked together in a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. A dry, derisive rasp. "Peaceful parley, Thelvar. We have folded 47 species into the Dominion in 2 centuries. Our fleets darken the skies of 300 systems. What could one more race, clinging to a handful of worlds, possibly possess that gives you pause? Look at them. Like, subscribe, share, and comment below. What would you do if an empire threatened your home?" The hologram shifted, displaying captured long-range imagery. The humans appeared. And to the Valkyrie, a species born of harsh worlds, clad in natural armor and bred for strength. They looked pitiful. Upright on 2 spindly legs, only 2 grasping arms. No claws, no protective hide, no natural weapons. They seemed fragile. Soft, a prey species that had somehow stumbled into the stars. They looked like they would break in a strong wind. Commander Valixa sneered, her scaled lips curling. No natural advantages. How did such frail things not only survive but reach for the void? Thelvar called up data on his tablet, his unease thickening. "That is the precise source of my disquiet, Commander. Our analysis suggests they have been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. A blink. Yet their rate of expansion is statistically anomalous. Their propulsion technology appears advanced. There is a dissonance here that warrants investigation." Enough. Cathron's hand sliced through the air, dismissing the data as he would a gnat. Every upstart species believes its toys are special. Every fledgling civilization nurses a fantasy of uniqueness. Then they meet the Dominion. They learn the true universal constants: strength, discipline, and the absolute will to dominate. These humans will learn this lesson as all others have. He turned to the tactical display, where the cold mathematics of power were laid bare. "Our forces have massed at the border for 3 weeks. 327 warships, 15 dreadnoughts. We possess the concentrated firepower to reduce their little colonies to atomic dust. They will see this might, this inevitable tide, and they will kneel, as all others have done. Felvar's internal temperature dropped. And if they do not kneel, my lord? Kthron's eyes glinted in the holographic light, cold as deep space. Then we demonstrate the price of defiance. Transmit the standard ultimatum. They have 48 hours to acknowledge Dominion sovereignty over all contested systems and begin immediate evacuation. If they refuse, we will remove them. The galaxy is a garden, Ambassador. We are the gardeners, and we prune that which does not belong. The message was sent, a masterpiece of galactic arrogance wrapped in flowery prose about progress and community. Beneath the veneer of diplomacy, its core was a simple, brutal calculus. Submit or be erased. The human response arrived in less than 6 hours. Felvar read it first, and the cold in his veins turned to ice. He brought the data slate to Kthron, his silver scales seeming to pale. The Admiral took it and read aloud, his voice dripping with contempt that slowly curdled into fury. To the Velkari Dominion. We decline your offer. Human colonies are sovereign territory. Any military action against our citizens will be considered an act of war. We strongly advise you to reconsider your position. You do not understand what you are threatening. Silence for a heartbeat. Then Kithron's powerful hand clenched. The data slate crumpled with a screech of tortured plastic and metal. We arrogance, he breathed, the word hot with insult. They dare to threaten us, Commander Velixus, their forced disposition in the region. Velixus consulted her panel. No more than 30 vessels, my lord. Mostly light patrol craft, freighters. No significant military stations. No defensive platforms. No credible threat. Kithron tossed the shattered slate aside. Then we educate them. Target the mining colony on the 4th planet of the system they call New Aberdeen. Isolated, but valuable. A surgical strike. Destroy their orbital infrastructure. Let the shockwave of our mercy be their final warning before we take everything. My lord, I must protest, Felvar began. But Kthron was already turning away. You protest shadows, Ambassador. This is the oldest tactic of the weak. Bluster to mask fragility. They hope to plant doubt, but empires are not built on doubt. They are forged in certainty, and I am certain. The Volcari Armada moved into position. A symphony of polished might. Dreadnoughts formed an implacable core, shielded by concentric rings of cruisers and destroyers, with frigates dancing on the flanks like eager hounds. It was a formation that had shattered planetary defenses and broken the wills of species. Against the quiet mining world of New Aberdeen, it was obscene overkill. From orbit, the colony was a testament to humble industry, neat domes, sprawling excavation sites. 3 orbital stations that processed raw ore into precious metals. A population of 15,000 souls, most of them miners and their families, dreaming of a future under unfamiliar stars. Targeting solutions locked, Admiral, Velixus reported. The orbital stations. Minimal collateral damage below. The electromagnetic pulse will disable their ground systems. A clear demonstration. Kthron nodded. Let it be a lesson in our capacity for precision. And for mercy. Open fire. Space seal with light. Plasma cannons and particle beams. The elegant weapons of a mature warrior culture. Lanced across the void. The human stations, built for industry, not war, ceased to exist in silent, spectacular blooms of white-hot gas and spinning debris. The EMP washed over the colony below, snuffing out lights, silencing machines, plunging a world into a terrified, pre-industrial dark. On the surface, in the sudden silence, broken only by sirens and screams, 42 human lives ended. Miners caught on a station shift, technicians, a maintenance crew. Among the debris raining as fire through the atmosphere were the hopes of families, the quiet courage of pioneers. On the bridge of the Invictus, Cathron watched the expanding clouds of wreckage with grim satisfaction. Transmit again. Tell them this is but a prelude. We return in 72 hours for their surrender. The next target will be a world with billions. As the mighty fleet began its triumphant withdrawal, a new signal tore through every frequency, overriding Velkari systems with terrifying ease. The voice was human, male, and carried a calm that was more threatening than any scream. Velkari Fleet. This is Rear Admiral Marcus Wright of the United Human Space Forces. You have attacked a civilian colony without provocation. You have killed 42 human citizens. This is an act of war. The voice paused, letting the declaration hang in the electronic silence. We are dispatching the UHSF Eternal Resolve to your position. You are ordered to remain in this system and prepare to surrender your vessels. Any attempt to flee or cause further harm will result in the complete and utter destruction of your fleet. The channel went dead. For a moment, there was only the hum of the flagship systems. Then Cathron laughed, a harsh, disbelieving bark. One ship. They send one ship against our armada, and they demand our surrender? He turned, his mirth genuine. Tactical. When does this eternal resolve arrive? The officer stared at his console, his digits trembling. My lord. Spatial distortions. 3 light-years out. The readings. The projected speed. It is impossible. Our physics. The main viewer lit up with raw sensor data. Cathron's laughter died. The readings showed not a ship, but a tear in reality itself. A ripple in space-time moving toward them at a velocity that defied comprehension. It was like watching a tsunami form in the fabric of the cosmos. Felvar whispered, My lord, that will be here in less than 3 days. Cathron squared his shoulders, the old certainty battling a new, cold trickle in his blood. Then we wait. We meet this resolve with the full majesty of the Dominion. If they wish to make a symbolic last stand with a single vessel, we will oblige them. And then we will burn their worlds until their name is a cautionary footnote in our history. But as the hours bled into days, the dissonance grew. Scout ships sent to probe the approaching distortion vanished, swallowed by the rippling spatial anomalies. Sensor returns became gibberish. A deep, subconscious dread began to permeate the fleet. They were not awaiting a ship. They were awaiting an event. On the morning of the 3rd day, the space around the Velkari Armada screamed. Gravitational waves, palpable and violent, rocked the mighty warships. Alarms shrieked as systems overloaded. On the viewer, the distant stars blurred and stretched. And then, from the heart of the distortion, it emerged. The UHSF Eternal Resolve did not simply arrive. It manifested, like a black hole given form and purpose. It was not a ship. It was a continent of weaponized alloy. Kilometers of matte black armor that drank the light of the stars. It made the Valkyrie dreadnoughts look like lifeboats. Along its impossible length, thousands of weapon ports yawned like the mouths of caverns. As its running lights ignited, they revealed the name etched into its hull in letters larger than city blocks: Eternal Resolve. On the bridge of the Invictus, the command crews stood frozen. Felvar's whisper was the sound of a universe shifting. Merciful ancestors, what have we awakened? Commander Valixis's voice was a broken thing. Power readings exceeding our entire fleet combined. Defensive field density incalculable. Fighter bays for craft the size of our cruisers. Cathron could only stare. His strategic mind, so adept at calculating odds, failing utterly. This was not a difference of degree. It was a difference of kind. The calm human voice returned, echoing in the tomb silence of the bridge. Valkyrie fleet, this is the UHSF, Eternal Resolve. You are surrounded by weapon systems capable of annihilating your entire force in minutes. This is your sole opportunity. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You will be returned to your government with our formal declaration of war. Or you can fight, and we will send your wreckage home instead. You have 5 minutes. Choose. The transmission ended. 5 minutes. To surrender an empire's pride to a single, silent monument of war. Admiral Cathron, conqueror of worlds, felt the first true fear of his life. It was not the fear of death. It was the fear of irrelevance. He had brought the hammer of the gods to crush an insect, only to find he was the insect, and the true hammer was now hovering before him, waiting to see if it needed to fall. 5 minutes. On the bridge of the Invictus, 5 minutes stretched into a lifetime of silent, suffocating dread. Every Valkyrie eye was locked on the main viewer, where the Eternal Resolve hung in the void, a monolithic slab of silent, patient judgment. It did not maneuver. It did not power up obvious weapons. It simply was, its sheer oppressive presence, a psychological weapon more devastating than any barrage. The human voice had not issued a threat. It had stated a fact of celestial mechanics, as incontrovertible as gravity. Admiral Cathron's pride, a fortress built over decades of conquest, cracked under the strain. The old instincts roared, attack, overwhelm. But a newer, colder voice whispered of scout ships that vanished, of physics that bent, of the sheer, terrifying scale of the thing before them. Tactical, he barked, the word tearing from a dry throat. Analysis. Give me options. Commander Valixis's hands fluttered over her console, her movements uncharacteristically jerky. My lord, targeting solutions are unstable. The human ship's energy signature creates massive sensor distortion. Its defensive field, the power readings are theoretical. Our models suggest it could withstand the combined fire of our entire front line for hours, perhaps. She looked up, her eyes wide. That is, if the field does not have active regeneration or reflection properties, which our scattered data suggests it might. Felvar, the diplomat, saw the flicker in Cathron's eyes, not of courage, but of catastrophic cognitive dissonance. The Admiral's universe had no template for this. My lord, Felvar said, stepping close, his voice a low, urgent thread. Consider their offer. Surrender. Allow custody. It buys time. It preserves the fleet to carry a warning home. A warning the Dominion desperately needs to hear. Cathron hissed, the word of blasphemy. 300 warships to 1. You would have me etch our shame across the stars for eternity. Every vassal species would see it. The rebellions would burn our empire to ash. Better rebellions we can manage, Thelvar pressed. Desperation cutting through protocol, then a fleet reduced to atoms and a warning never delivered. If we fight and lose, when we fight and lose, the result is the same, but with no one left to say why. Cathron turned from him, his mandibles tight. The gambler in him, the conqueror, made one last calculation. He would not surrender, but neither would he be the fool who charged a fortress head-on. Battle formation Delta 7, he commanded. The old, familiar drill a comfort. All dreadnoughts to the fore. Overlapping shield harmonics. Cruisers in support. Destroyers on flank suppression. We do not commit. We probe. One coordinated salvo on my mark. Let us see if this human leviathan can truly bleed. Across the fleet, a ripple of movement. The majestic, terrifying ballet of Velkhari war unfolded. 15 city-sized dreadnoughts slid forward, their shields merging into a single, shimmering wall of energy. Behind them, the cruisers and destroyers arrayed themselves, weapons charging, filling the space with the ominous hum of gathering power. It was a spectacle that had broken civilizations. Against the silent, black form of the eternal resolve, it looked suddenly quaint. On the bridge of the human battleship, Captain Elizabeth Chen observed the Velkhari redeployment with the detached focus of a chess master. Her command center was a temple to function. No ornate carvings, no trophies, just the soft glow of countless displays painting her sharp features in shifting light. They're not surrendering, observed Lieutenant Commander James Park from Tactical. His voice held no surprise, only the cool satisfaction of a prediction confirmed. Delta 7 formation. Textbook Velkhari doctrine. They want to test our shields, gauge our response. Captain Chen nodded slowly. They are operating on a library of data that does not contain us. They believe this is a first contact. It is not. She leaned forward slightly. For us, this is 100 years of theoretical war games, of preparing for the worst the galaxy could conjure. For them, it is Tuesday. Her gaze hardened. Rules of engagement. Weapons free on my command. Primary targets, the dreadnoughts. Let's be surgical. Let's be definitive. Across the eternal resolve, a new kind of hum answered the Velkharis, a deeper, more fundamental vibration as power was routed not from reactors, but from the pinned energy of space-time itself. All vessels, weapons to maximum. Concentrate fire on the central mass. Kron's order echoed across the fleet. Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Space dissolved into a cataclysm of light. The combined fire of 300 warships converged on a single point. A storm of plasma lances, particle beams, and volleys of hypervelocity missiles. It was an apocalyptic torrent of energy, enough to crack a continent, to boil away oceans. It struck the shimmering field surrounding the eternal resolve, and did nothing. No, not nothing. The energy was absorbed, dispersed, deflected. The human defensive field, a multi-layered gravitational lens, simply bent reality around the ship. Solid projectiles were whipped away on impossible trajectories. Energy beams shattered into harmless rainbows. Missiles were caught in gravitational eddies and crushed into silent miniature supernovae well before detonation. The shields did not even flicker. On the Velkhari sensors, the damage report was a single, blinking, soul-crushing word. 0.00%. Impossible, Velixus breathed, her voice hollow with shock. Our entire Alpha Strike. Zero. Effect. Zero. Before the word had fully left her mouth, the eternal resolve responded. It was not the thunderous broadside they expected. It was a single, precise, and horrifyingly casual act of violence. Along the port flank of the human ship, a magnetic rail of impossible length charged. There was no brilliant flash, no roaring discharge, only a subtle ripple in space. The Velkari dreadnought Valor's Hammer, pride of the Third Fleet, simply ceased to exist. One moment, a 5-kilometer-long bastion of armor and fury. The next, an expanding cloud of superheated gas and shrapnel. A tungsten projectile the size of a small building had crossed the distance at a fraction of light speed. Kinetic energy did the rest. Shields, gone. Armor, vaporized. The ship was not destroyed. It was disassembled at the atomic level. Silence, more profound than the void itself, gripped the Velkari command frequency. Then, hell methodically unleashed itself. Captain Chen's voice was calm on her own bridge. Port broadside, plasma lances, batteries 1 through 10. Fire. 10 beams of coherent starfire, each as thick as a Velkari cruiser, lanced out. They were not weapons of explosion, but of absolute negation. They cut. 7 more dreadnoughts were sheared in half, their bisected halves spinning away, atmosphere and lives venting into the dark. 2 more were grievously wounded, transformed into drifting, burning tombs. In 10 seconds, 8 of the 15 Velkari capital ships were gone. Admiral Cathron's mind broke. The calculus of war, the foundation of his being, disintegrated. "Scatter!" he screamed, the order born of pure animal panic. "All ships, evasive patterns, break formation!" It was the worst possible command. As the Velkari fleet dissolved into a chaotic swarm, the Eternal Resolve's secondary bays opened. From within emerged the Javelin-class frigates. To the Velkari, these frigates were the size of their heavy cruisers, but they moved with the speed and grace of fighter craft, their agility defying physics. 20 of them shot into the fray like wolves among panicked sheep. The battle was no longer a battle. It was a harvest. A Velkari cruiser, engines flaring white-hot in its desperate flight, was pursued by a javelin. The human frigate closed the distance with contemptuous ease and fired a single, sleek torpedo. The weapon seemed to ignore conventional space, skipping through a bubble of warped reality before impacting the cruiser's engines. The resulting detonation was not an explosion, but a localized starburst, vaporizing the entire aft third of the ship. Elsewhere, Velkari destroyers that tried to rally were methodically dismantled by rapid-fire plasma cannons that chewed through their shields and hulls like paper. Escape pods jettisoned in frantic hope were carefully avoided, left to drift, a small, chilling mercy amidst the carnage. On the bridge of the Invictus, Commander Velixus was sobbing openly, her professional composure atomized along with her fleet. "We have lost 112 vessels. My lord, they are hunting us. We cannot run, we cannot hide." Thelvar stood motionless, watching the tactical display as green icons, each representing thousands of lives, winked out, one after another, with metronomic regularity. He was not seeing a defeat. He was witnessing the obsolescence of an entire paradigm of power. Cuthron stood before the viewer, his body rigid. He watched the eternal resolve. Immobile at the center of the storm it had created, a dark sun around which his fleet died. He heard in his memory the calm, sad warning from the human research vessel he had vaporized days earlier. "I'm sorry for what's going to happen." He finally understood the apology. With the ashes of his pride coating his tongue, he activated the fleet-wide channel. His voice, when it came, was the rasp of a broken machine. "All Velkari vessels, this is Admiral Cuthron. Ceasefire. Power down all weapons and defensive systems." He took a shuddering breath, the most difficult of his life. "Human vessel, eternal resolve. We surrender. We yield. Please cease fire." Across the shattered fleet, the shooting stopped. The sudden silence was more deafening than the fury that had preceded it. Broken ships drifted, leaking atmosphere and coolant like blood into the void. The Javelin frigates halted their pursuit, taking up guard positions, their weapons still trained. The human voice returned, as calm as ever. "Admiral Cuthron, your surrender is accepted. You will submit to boarding. Any resistance will be met with terminal force. One final thing, Admiral." Captain Chen's voice took on a new edge, colder than the space between stars. "You killed 42 civilians at New Aberdeen. 8 were children. Understand this. What you have witnessed today represents less than 7% of this vessel's combat capacity. The Eternal Resolve is 4 decades old. We have newer ships. Every human colony is guarded by defenses that could reduce your homeworld to a memory. You came believing you were predators. You thought we were prey. You were wrong. You are a message. You will carry that message home." The transmission ended. Cuthron slumped into his command throne, the weight of his catastrophic miscalculation physically crushing him. Around him, his bridge crew moved like ghosts, powering down systems under the watchful gaze of the monstrous ship on their screen. The boarding craft that arrived were not shuttles. They were armored spear tips, bristling with weapons. When the airlock cycled open, the Velkari security detail recoiled. The humans were encased in powered armor, 7-foot-tall, matte black juggernauts with glowing blue visors that revealed nothing of the beings within. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace, their integrated weapon systems humming with latent power. Sergeant Marcus Reynolds' voice emerged from his helmet, synthesized and devoid of mercy. "Take me to your command deck, now." The walk through the Invictus was a funeral procession. Velkari crew huddled in corridors, their arrogance replaced by blank, shell-shocked terror as the faceless human giants marched past. On the command deck, Cuthron, Thelvar and Velixis stood waiting, their honor guarded by nothing but the devastating truth. "You are all now prisoners of the United Human Space Forces," Reynolds stated. "You will be transported to the Eternal Resolve for processing. Your crew remains here under guard. Comply, and you live. Resist, and you join the wreckage." As they were led away, Cuthron took one last look at his bridge, the place from which he had commanded an empire's wrath. It felt like a child's playset now, a pathetic imitation of power. He had been playing at war, while humanity had been mastering it. The shuttle flight to the Eternal Resolve was a journey through a gallery of his own failure. His once mighty fleet was now a graveyard of twisted metal, being catalogued by efficient human salvage drones. And then they approached the human flagship itself. Docking Bay 7 could have housed the Invictus. The scale was not just impressive, it was demeaning. They were led to clean, sparse detention quarters, not a brig of chains and filth, but a sterile, precise holding cell. It spoke of a power so absolute it had no need for petty cruelty. Hours later, Captain Elizabeth Chen entered. She was small, unassuming, with sharp green eyes that held the weight of the weapon she commanded. "Admiral, this is a debriefing, not an interrogation. You will provide information on the Valkyrie Dominion, its size, its strength, its intentions. You will do this to prevent further unnecessary bloodshed." Defeated, hollow, Cathron talked. He outlined the Dominion. 317 systems, 4,000 warships, 47 subjugated species. He explained their doctrine of overwhelming force, of intimidation, of conquest as natural law. When he finished, he asked the question burning in his soul. "How? Our intelligence said you were newcomers, children in the dark. This," he gestured weakly at the ship around them, "is not the technology of children." Chen sat back. "You saw the length of our stride, Admiral, and assumed it was our first step. You are wrong. Humanity spent 10,000 years in the cradle, affecting the art of killing each other. We have fought with every tool imaginable, on every terrain conceivable. We nearly ended ourselves a dozen times over. When we finally reached the stars, we did not leave that knowledge behind. We brought it all. And then we spent our first century in space, practicing on each other. We unified, not out of naive peace, but out of exhausted, hard-won understanding. We looked into the galaxy and saw you. Empires built on the principles we had barely survived. So we made a choice. We would seek peace, but we would be ready for war. Truly ready." She leaned forward. "The Eternal Resolve is scheduled for decommissioning. We have newer ships. The lesson you received today was delivered with restraint. Remember that. You are a messenger now, Admiral. Your task is to make your Dominion understand the new reality. That is the only way your people survive." Kefron, the conqueror, the proud son of crimson-scaled nobility, bowed his head. He had not just lost a battle. He had encountered a fundamental law of the universe he never knew existed. That true power lies not in the willingness to destroy, but in the terrifying capacity to do so, married to the wisdom to choose not to. For the first time, he felt the weight of the 42 lives from New Aberdeen, not as a statistic of conquest, but as a debt that had nearly doomed his entire species. The message was clear, and he was its broken vessel. P.S. B.I. Admiral Kithron sat in the sterile quiet of his quarters aboard the Eternal Resolve, a ghost in a machine of ghosts. The hum of the human battleship was different from the resonant thrum of Valkyrie vessels. It was a deeper, more fundamental vibration, like the sound of a planet's core. It spoke of power sources and technologies that were not just advanced, but other. For 3 days, he had replayed the battle in his mind on a loop. Not as a commander analyzing tactics, but as a philosopher witnessing a revelation. The plasma lances that cut his dreadnoughts in half were not merely weapons. They were arguments, and the argument was irrefutable. On the fourth day, Commander Mitchell came for him. "Admiral, the channel to your Dominion Council is ready." He followed her to a communications chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a central holographic projector. Captain Chen was there, along with a human woman in formal diplomatic attire, Ambassador Sarah Martinez, and a stern-faced older man, Admiral Cthron recognized from the first warning broadcast, Rear Admiral Marcus Wright. Wright's eyes were the color of glacial ice, and they assessed Cthron not with hatred, but with the cold calculus of a man who had just rendered an entire empire strategically irrelevant. "They will be angry," Cthron said, the words tasting like ash. "They will call me a coward, a liar." "Then you will show them the truth," Captain Chen replied. "The sensor logs, the visual records, the tactical data stream. Let them see what you saw. The choice after that is theirs." The hologram flickered to life, and the Velkari Dominion Council materialized in the room. 7 beings, their scales marking the pinnacle of clan nobility, sat in a semicircle of absolute authority. At the center was Supreme Counselor Varoth, his golden scales dulled by the holographic transmission, but his presence no less imposing. His eyes burning with controlled fury, locked onto Cthron. "Admiral," Varoth's voice was a whip-crack. "You departed with 327 ships to secure our frontier. You return with your tail between your legs, your fleet captured or destroyed, speaking of a single enemy vessel. Your report strains credulity to its breaking point. Explain this catastrophe." Cthron felt the weight of their collective judgment, the scorn of a lifetime's peers. He straightened his spine, drawing on the last reserves of his dignity. "Supreme Counselor, Honored Council, what I must tell you will sound impossible. I ask not for your belief, but for your patience. Review the data we are transmitting now." He gestured, and a technician on the Eternal Resolve began the upload. To the Council's viewers, it would be a flood. Raw sensor feeds showing the impossible spatial distortion, the emergence of the Eternal Resolve, the complete nullification of their Alpha Strike, and then the methodical, surgical dismemberment of their fleet. The silent, terrifying efficiency of it. As the data played, Cthron narrated, his voice flat, stripped of all pride. "You are watching the Valor's hammer cease to exist. You are watching 8 dreadnoughts disintegrate in 10 seconds. You are watching our entire military doctrine become a historical footnote. They call it the Battle of New Aberdeen. We did not fight a battle. We conducted a test of our assumptions against a new set of physical laws. We failed." The council chamber was silent as the final images played. The Javelin frigates hunting, the surrender call. Ambassador Martinez stepped forward. "Supreme Counselor Varoth, I am Ambassador Sarah Martinez of the United Human Government. The attack on New Aberdeen was an unprovoked act of war against a civilian target. Humanity's response was measured and precise. We do not seek the destruction of the Velkari Dominion. We seek a change in its behavior." Varoth's gaze shifted. The anger now mingled with a dawning, horrifying comprehension as the data continued to stream. "What," he asked, each word precise, "are your terms?" Admiral Wright answered, his voice like grinding stone. "First, a formal apology and reparations to the families of the 42 killed. Second, an immediate and permanent cessation of military expansion. You will begin withdrawing from systems where you are imposing rule on indigenous species. Third, You will provide full transparency on all species under your control. Fourth, you will accept human observers within your territory to verify compliance. Councillor Silvara, her scales flushed with outrage, slammed a hand on the table. You expect us to dismantle our empire on your say-so, based on one engagement. The Dominion has thousands of ships. We have conquered 47 species. You have one powerful vessel. Wright didn't blink. He manipulated a console, and new holograms bloomed beside him. The Eternal Resolve is one of 32 battleships in her class or greater. This is the Indomitable, he said, as a ship twice the size of the Resolve rotated slowly, covered in weapon mounts. This is the carrier Endeavour, a vessel that launched swarms of fighter craft the size of Valkyrie destroyers. These are our planetary defense platforms, capable of generating shields that can withstand sustained bombardment from a fleet 10 times the size of the one you sent to New Aberdeen. He let the images hang. This is not a negotiation about parity, Councillor. This is a notification of a new strategic reality. You can accept these reasonable terms and evolve, or you can choose war. If you choose war, we will dismantle your military infrastructure, blockade your worlds, and remove your government. The choice is simple: survival or oblivion. The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Varoth stared at the displays of human power, then back at Cathron's defeated form. "Admiral," he said quietly, all bluster gone. "Your honest assessment. If we refuse and fight, what is the outcome?" Cathron met his leader's eyes. He thought of the calm on Captain Chen's face as she ordered the broadside. He thought of the human marine's faceless visor. He thought of the sheer, silent mass of the ship he was standing in. "We will lose, Supreme Councillor," he said, his voice finally breaking with the raw truth of it. "Not after a valiant struggle. Not after years of conflict. We will lose quickly, decisively, and totally. They have not shown us their limits. They have only shown us a fraction of their capability. To fight is to choose suicide for our entire civilization. They are offering us a path to survive, to become something else." Felvar, who had been brought to the comm room, spoke from behind Kethron. "Supreme Councillor, I have been their prisoner, and I have been their student. They are not conquerors. They do not seek to rule us. They seek to create a stable, peaceful region of space. They offer a coalition, not subjugation. This is not our end. It is our chance to become a legitimate government, rather than an empire sustained by fear." Varoth closed his eyes. The weight of centuries of conquest, of a culture built on dominance, pressed down on him. He saw the data. He heard the absolute certainty in Wright's voice and the shattered truth in Kethron's. He looked at the faces of his fellow councillors and saw the same cold realization dawning in their eyes. The galaxy had just become infinitely larger and infinitely more dangerous. "We will need time to confer," Varoth said, the words heavy. "You have 24 hours, Wright stated. No more." The transmission cut. The following day, the Valkyrie Dominion formally accepted the human terms. In the weeks that followed, a new, strange rhythm began in that sector of the galaxy. The captured Valkyrie ships and crews were returned. Escorted to the border by Javelin frigates, Admiral Cathron and his staff were released, carrying not just the formal documents of the peace, but the indelible, psychic scars of their lesson. Human observers, small teams in unarmed diplomatic cutters, began arriving in Valkyrie space. They were polite, professional, and utterly implacable. On the homeworld, the transformation was a quiet earthquake. The word dominion began to be spoken less. In its place, whispers of federation arose. Under the watchful, non-intrusive gaze of the human observers, the Velkari began the painful, complex process of decolonization. Worlds they had ruled for generations were granted autonomy. Treaties were signed, not at the barrel of a plasma cannon, but across negotiation tables, often facilitated by human mediators. The news, of course, did not stay contained. It spread through trade lanes, via fleeing scouts from other empires. Through the whisper net of galactic intrigue. The story was too colossal to suppress. The Velkari, the unassailable conquerors, had been humbled by a single ship from a species no one had feared. The ripple effects were immediate and profound. In the halls of the Kryn hegemony, a militaristic species even more aggressive than the Velkari, the planned invasion of the pacifist Solari systems was abruptly cancelled. Fleet movements ceased. The Kryn High Command had seen the sensor data, purchased at great cost from a Velkari defector. They saw the dreadnoughts vanish. And they understood. Piracy along the major trade routes plummeted. Raiders who had preyed upon vulnerable freighters suddenly found their targets accompanied by sleek, human-built escort drones, or worse, a passive human transponder signal that was the galactic equivalent of a warning flare. And then came the requests. Ambassador Martinez found her desk flooded with petitions. The Solari, crystalline beings of light and song, formally requested human protection. The Vex, a small arboreal species, begged for admission to a proposed coalition for peaceful cooperation. Dozens of minor species, long living under the threat of Velkari, Kryn, or other predators, saw in humanity not a new master, but a shield. 6 months after the Battle of New Aberdeen, Ambassador Felvar stood before a reformed Velkari council, no longer a dominion, but a provisional federation. He was now their chief liaison to humanity. The decolonization proceeds ahead of schedule, he reported. 17 species now have full independence. The humans have been helpful. They provide technical and economic advisors to ease the transition. They ask for nothing in return, but our continued commitment to peace. Councillor Silvara, her earlier fury now tempered into a grudging awe, spoke. And this coalition? Are we to become vassals in a human empire after all? No, Felvar said firmly. That is the precise distinction. The coalition is a mutual defense and economic pact. Sovereignty is absolute. The humans provide security. We agree to certain principles. No aggressive war, peaceful dispute resolution, free trade. It is not domination. It is a partnership of necessity and of choice. In another star system, at the newly built coalition headquarters station, Admiral Wright and Ambassador Martinez watched representatives from 23 species debate membership protocols. It was chaotic, vibrant, and hopeful. It's working, Martinez said, a note of wonder in her voice. They're actually building something. Not out of fear of us, but out of the safety we provide. Wright nodded, his stern face softening a fraction. The eternal resolve did more than destroy 100 ships, Sarah. It created a space where this, he gestured to the bustling chamber, could even be imagined. We didn't just win a battle, we changed the calculus. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Captain Chen received new orders. The ship would not be decommissioned. It would serve as the flagship of the Coalition patrol fleet for the next decade. She addressed her crew, her voice echoing through the miles of corridors. 6 months ago, we fought to protect our own, she said. Today, our mission evolves. We are no longer just the sword of humanity. We are the shield for those who cannot shield themselves. Our presence here prevents wars before they start. Our reputation gives peace a chance to grow. This is the heavier burden and the greater honor. Among her crew, the response was not just agreement, but a deep, resolute pride. They had seen the alternative. On the rebuilt colony of New Aberdeen, Governor Morrison stood before a new memorial, a simple plinth of local stone under an open sky, bearing 42 names. Captain Chen stood beside her. "Do you think they would understand?" Morrison asked softly. "That their loss led to this? To peace?" "I think," Chen said, gazing at the stars beginning to pierce the twilight, "that they would have hoped for it." "We don't get to choose the seeds from which peace grows, Governor. Sometimes they are planted in tragedy. Our duty is to tend the garden that follows." Far away, former Admiral Cuthron published his journals. They became a bestseller, then required reading in Velkari military academies. He wrote, "We saw their ship, and in that moment we knew our old world was ending. We thought it was the end of everything. We were wrong. It was the end of our childhood as a species. They shattered not just our fleet, but our myths. They taught us that the strongest power is not the one that destroys most easily, but the one that can destroy and chooses instead to build. We were not defeated by an enemy. We were educated by a wiser civilization. And in that education, we found our only path to a future worth having." The galaxy continued to turn. The Eternal Resolve, a silent, dark sentinel, patrolled the borders of the growing coalition. Its very existence was a deterrent, a standing argument against aggression. New species looked to humanity, not with the terrified obedience once given to the Velkari, but with the wary trust given to a powerful, principled neighbor. The age of conquest in that region of space had ended, not with a slow decline, but with a single, shocking, decisive demonstration. Humanity had drawn a line, not in the sand, but in the fabric of space-time itself. They had shown that they could be the most terrifying destroyers the stars had ever known. And then, they had offered a hand. The lesson was learned. The message was delivered. And in the quiet that followed the thunder, something new, fragile and hopeful began, for the first time, to grow.